Qualitative Research Tools, Business Research Methods, Chapter 7. After studying this chapter, you should be able to list and understand the differences between qualitative research and quantitative research, understand the role of qualitative research in exploratory research designs, describe the basic qualitative research orientation, prepare a focus group interview outline, recognize technological advances in the application of qualitative research approaches, recognize common qualitative research tools and know the advantages and limitations of their use, and know the risk associated with acting on only exploratory results. The introductory chapter is What's in the van? Is this shoe too cool? That was really the question asked by VF Corporation when they acquired Vans, the company that makes the shoes shown in this picture. So Vans traditionally are synonymous with skateboarding and skateboard culture, and readers that are familiar or unfamiliar with skateboarding may well have never heard of the company. However, a reader that is part of the skateboard culture is probably looking down at his or her Vans right now. So the former Vans CEO points out that a decade before the acquisition, Vans was practically a dead brand. But however, in the last 10 years, they have seen a revival in the skateboard interest, and Vans has remained the #1 skateboard shoe provider. So, where will the growth come from? Should the company define itself as a skateboard footwear company, a lifestyle company, or the icon for skate culture? So, answering these questions will require a deeper interpretation of the meaning of the van. So, yes, skateboarding is a very dynamic activity, but what exactly is in the mind and heart of a boarder? So two important research questions were what is the meaning of a pair of Vans and what things define the skateboarding experience. So questions like this call for qualitative research methods. Not just any researcher is fit for this job. So one way to collect the data is to hire young, energetic research employees to become boarders and immerse themselves into this culture. So Vans may find that their brands help identify a boarder and make them feel unique in some ways. So if so, Vans may want to investigate increasing their product line beyond shoes and simply apparel. So these deep interviews of van wearers in which people describe in details why they wear this type of shoes, maybe there are some secondary segments as well that could bring growth to this company, but marketing to them could be a complicated things. But again, who knows? So chemists use the term qualitative analysis to mean research that determines what some compound is made of. So in other words, the focus is on the inner meaning of the chemical, its qualities. As the word implies, qualitative research is interested more in qualities than quantities. So therefore, qualitative research is not about applying specific numbers to measure variables or using statistical procedures to numerically specify a relationship strength. So what is qualitative research? Qualitative business research is research that addresses business objectives through techniques that allow the researcher to provide elaborate interpretations of market phenomena without depending on numerical measurements. It focuses on discovering true inner meaning and new insights. Qualitative research is very widely applied in practice, and there are many research companies that specialize in qualitative research. Qualitative research is less structured than most quantitative approaches, and it does not rely on self-response questionnaire containing structured response formats. Instead, it is more research dependent. in that the researcher must extract meaning from unstructured responses, such as text from a recorded interview or a collage representing the meaning of some experiences, like skateboarding maybe. And the researcher interprets the data to extract its meaning and converts it to information. Mechanics can't use a hammer to fix everything that is broken. Instead, the mechanic has a toolbox from which a tool is matched to a specific problem. Business research is pretty much the same. So the researcher has many tools available, and the research design should try to match the best tool to the research objective. Just as a mechanic is probably not an expert with every tool, each researcher usually has a special expertise with a small number of tools, and not every researcher has expertise with tools that would compromise qualitative research. So generally, the less specific the research objective, the more likely the qualitative research tool will be appropriate. So when the emphasis is on a deeper understanding of motivations or on developing new concepts, qualitative research is often very appropriate. And this is a list representing common situations that often call for qualitative research. The first one, when it is difficult to develop specific and actionable problem statements or research objectives. Second, when a research objective is to develop an understanding of some phenomena in great details and in way much depth. Qualitative research are aimed at discovering the primary themes indicating human motivations, and the documentation of activities is usually very complete. Often qualitative research provides richer information than quantitative approaches. The third one, when the research objective is to learn how a phenomena occurs in its natural setting or to learn how to express some concepts in colloquial terms. While a survey can probably ask many useful questions, observing a product in use or watching the invoice process will usually be more insightful. So qualitative research produces many product and process improvement ideas. The next one, the behavior of the researcher, where some behavior, when some behavior the researcher is studying is particularly context dependent, meaning the reasons something is liked or some behavior is performed depend very much on the particular situation surrounding that specific event. Like with the van, understanding why vans are liked is probably difficult to determine correctly outside the skating environment. And the last one, when a fresh approach to studying some problem is needed, this particular case when quantitative research has yielded less than satisfying results, qualitative tools can yield unique insights, and many of which may lead the organization in new directions. Qualitative versus quantitative research. In social science, one can find many debates about the superiority of qualitative research over quantitative research or vice versa. We'll begin by saying that this is largely a superfluous argument in either direction. The truth is that qualitative research can accomplish research objectives that quantitative research cannot. Similarly truthful, but not more so, quantitative research can accomplish objectives that qualitative research cannot. So the key to successful using either is to match the right approach to the right research context. So many good research projects combine both qualitative and quantitative research. Developing a valid survey measures require first a deep understanding of the concept to be measured and a description of the way these ideas are expressed in everyday language. Both of these are tasks best suited for qualitative research. However, validating the measure formally to make sure it can reliably capture the intended concept will likely require quantitative research. As well, qualitative research may be needed to separate symptoms from problems, and then quantitative research can follow up to test relationships among different variables. Qualitative business research can be defined as business research that addresses research objective through empirical assessment that involve numerical measurement and analysis approaches. Qualitative research is more apt to stand on its own in the sense that it requires less interpretation. Quantitative research is quite appropriate when a research objective involves the managerial action standard. Discoveries at Procter & Gamble. With literally thousands of products to manage, Procter & Gamble finds itself in the situation to conduct qualitative research almost daily. And P&G doesn't introduce a product that hasn't been reviewed from nearly every possible angle. Before taking a product to a new country, you can be confident that the product has been focus grouped in that environment. And P&G often used qualitative research techniques to discover potential problems or opportunities for the company's product. Focus groups played a major role in Herbal Essence hair care new logo, advertising copy, reformulated ingredients, and the new bottle design. The redesigned bottle for shampoo and conditioner bottles are curved in an yin-yang fashion so they can fit together. All time, P&G seeks outside help for its research, and it was the case when P&G wanted a study on its own business problems, and the researchers selected began to apply qualitative research techniques including deep interview, observational techniques, and focus groups on the managers. And these interviews gave the researchers the idea that perhaps P&G was suffering from a management problem more than a marketing problem. And it helped form a general research question that asked whether business problems were really due to low morale among the employees. After a lot of qualitative interviews with dozens and dozens of P&G employees, a quantitative study followed up these findings and supported the idea, leading to suggestions of improving employee morale. Comparing qualitative and quantitative research. And this exhibit illustrates some differences between qualitative and quantitative research. Centrally, these are generalities and exceptions may apply. Quantitative researchers direct a considerable amount of activity toward measuring concepts with scales that either directly or indirectly provide numeric values. The numeric values can then be used in statistical computation and hypothesis testing. In contrast, qualitative research are more interested in observing, listening, and interpreting. The researcher is intimately involved in the research process and is constructing the results. So qualitative reason is said to be more subjective, meaning that the results are research dependent. Different researchers may reach different conclusions based on the same interview. And qualitative research lacks intersubjective certifiability, the ability of different individuals following the same procedures to produce the same results or come to the same conclusions. This should not necessarily be considered a weakness of qualitative research, rather it's a simply characteristic that yields differing insights. When a survey respondent provide a commitment score or quantitative scale, it is thought to be more objective because the number will be the same no matter what researcher is involved in the analysis. Qualitative research seldom involves samples with hundreds of respondents. Instead, a handful of people are usually the source of the qualitative data. So this is perfectly acceptable in discovery-oriented research. All ideas would still have to be tested before adopted. Does a smaller sample mean that qualitative research is cheaper than quantitative? Perhaps not, although fewer respondents have to be interviewed, the greater research involvement in both the data collection and the analysis can drive up the cost of qualitative research. So given the close relationship between qualitative research and exploratory design, it should not be surprising that qualitative research is more often used in exploratory design, and small samples, interpretive procedures that require subjective judgments, and the unstructured interview format and make traditional hypothesis testing difficult with qualitative research. So these procedures are not best suited for drawing definitive conclusions as would be expected from causal design involving experiments. The disadvantages for drawing inferences, however, becomes an advantage when the goal is to draw out potential explanations because the researcher spends more time with each respondent and is able to explore much more ground due to the flexibility of the procedures. Contrasting exploratory and confirmatory research. Philosophically, research can be considered as either exploratory or confirmatory. Most exploratory research design produce qualitative data. Exploratory design do not usually produce quantitative data which represent phenomena by assigning numbers in an order and a meaningful way. Rather than numbers, the focus of qualitative research is on stories, visual portrayals, meaningful characterizations, interpretations, and other expressive descriptions. Often exploratory research may be needed to develop the ideas that lead to research hypotheses. In some situations, the outcome of exploratory research is testable research hypothesis. Confirmatory research then tests this hypothesis with quantitative data. The results of this test help decision making by suggesting a specific course of action. For example, an exploratory researcher is more likely to adopt the qualitative approach that might involve trying to develop a deeper understanding of how families are impacted by changing economic conditions, investigating how people suffering economically spend scarce resources, and then this may lead to the development of a hypothesis that during challenging economic times, consumers seek low-cost entertainment, such as movie rentals, but would not test this hypothesis. In contrast, a quantitative researcher may search for numbers that indicate economic trends, and this may lead to hypothesis tests concerning how much the economy influences rental movie consumptions. So some types of qualitative study can be conducted very quickly, some others will take a very long time. But when researchers have limited experience or knowledge about the research issue, exploratory research is a useful step. Exploratory research, which often involves qualitative methods, can be an essential first step to a more conclusive confirmatory study by reducing the chance of being with an inadequate, incorrect, or misleading set of research objectives. Qualitative research orientations. Qualitative research can be performed in many ways using many techniques, and orientation to qualitative research are very much influenced by different fields of study involved in research, and these are the ones associated with category of qualitative research. The majors are phenomenology, originating in philosophy and psychology, ethnography, originating in anthropology, grounded theory, originating in sociology, and case study, originating in psychology and in business research. Precise lines between these approaches are difficult to draw, and there are clearly links among these orientations. A particular qualitative research study may involve elements of two or more approaches. However, each category does reflect a somewhat unique approach to human inquiry and approaches to discovering knowledge. Now, the first one, phenomenology, represents a philosophical approach to studying human experiences based on the idea that human experience itself is inherently subjective and determined by the context in which people live. The phenomenological researcher focuses on how a person's behavior is shaped by the relationship he or she has with the physical environment, object, people, situations. Phenomenological inquiry seeks to describe, to reflect upon, and interpret experiences. Researchers with a phenomenological orientation rely largely on conversational interview tools. When conversational interviews are face-to-face, they are recorded either with video or audio tape, and they're interpreted by the researcher. The interviewer is careful to avoid asking direct questions when it is possible. The research respondent is asked to tell a story about some experiences. The researcher must do everything possible to make sure a respondent is comfortable telling his or her story. One way to accomplish this is to become a member of a group. Another way may be to avoid having the person use his or her real name. And it might be necessary when you study the potential sensitive topics like smoking or shoplifting or employee theft. So that's why phenomenological approach to studying the meaning of vans requires considerable time, and the researcher may first spend weeks or months fitting in with the person or group of interest and establishing a comfort level, and note carefully the conversations that are made. Rather, asking for favorite skateboard incidents or talking about what makes a skateboarder unique may generate this productive conversation. And generally, the approach is a very unstructured one, a way of avoiding leading questions and to provide every opportunities for new insights. When will I ever learn? This is an example where a hermeneutic approach can be used to provide insight into a car shopping experience. The approach involves a small number of consumers providing relatively lengthy stories about recent car shopping experiences, and the goal is to try to discover particular reasons why certain car models are eliminated from considerations. And the research concluded that a hermeneutic link exists between the phrase "when am I going to learn" and the plot of self-responsibility. The resulting behavior, including no longer considering GM products and the negative word-of-mouth behavior, are ways of restoring esteem given some events. So hermeneutics, what is hermeneutics? Is important in phenomenology. Is an approach to understanding phenomenology that relies on analysis of text in which a person tells a story about him or herself. Meaning is then drawn by connecting text passages to another or to themes expressed outside the story. These connections are usually facilitated by coding the key meaning expressed in the story. While a full understanding of hermeneutic is beyond the scope of the discourse, some of the terminology is used when applying qualitative tools. A hermeneutic unit refers to a text passage from a respondent story that is linked with the key theme from within the story or provided by the researchers. And these passages are an important way in which the data is interpreted. Computerized software exists to assist in coding and interpreting text and images. And hermeneutic units and computerized software are very appropriate in grounded theory approaches as well. What is ethnography? Ethnography represents a way of studying culture through methods that involve becoming highly active within a specific culture. Participant observation typifies an ethnographic research approach. Participant observation means the researchers become immersed within the culture that he or she is studying and draws data from his or her observation. A culture can be either a broad culture, like the American culture, a narrow culture like urban gangs or Harley Davidson owners or skateboarding enthusiasts. Organizational culture would also be relevant for ethnographic studies, and researchers have actually become employees of an organization for an extended period of time, and in doing so they become part of the culture, and over time other employees come to act quite naturally around the researcher, and the researcher may observe the behavior of that specific employee. That would reveal, otherwise in other environments. A researcher investigating the ethical behavior of salespeople may have difficulties getting a car salesperson to reveal any potential deceptive sales tactic in a traditional interview. But true, however, ethnographic techniques may result in the salesperson letting down his or her guard, resulting in a more valid discoveries about the car selling culture. Grounded theory is probably applied less often in business research than in either phenomenology or ethnography. Grounded theory represents an inductive investigation in which the researcher poses questions about information provided by respondents or taken from historical records. The researcher asks the questions to him or herself and repeatedly questions the responses to derive deeper explanations. Grounded theory is particularly applicable in highly dynamic situations involving rapid and significant change. Two key questions asked by the grounded theory researchers are: what is happening here and how is it different? The distinguished characteristic of grounded theory is that it does not begin with a theory, but instead extract one from whatever emerged from an area of inquiry. Computerized software as well can be useful in developing grounded theory. And in our van examples, the researcher may interpret skateboarder stories of good and bad skating experience by questioning the events and changes described. And this may yield theories about the role of certain brands play in shaping a good or bad experience. So grounded theorists often rely on visual representations as well. Colleges representing good or bad experiences. Case studies. Case studies simply refer to the documented history of a particular person, group, organization, or event. Typically, a case study may describe the events of a specific company as it faces an important decision or situation, such as introducing a new product or dealing with some management crisis. And the case studies can be analyzed for important themes. Themes are identified by the frequency with which the same term or a synonym arise in the narrative description. And these themes may be useful in discovering variables that are relevant to potential explanations. A sensory safari provides playtime and good research for Time Warner Cable. Traditional focus groups are used by business for a variety of reasons, and most notably for opportunity to see how potential consumers will react to new products or new services. But new focus group techniques are bringing this experience to another level. So Spark, a New York-based market research company, has sought to engage all of the senses of consumers as a way to understand the potential product or services. And consumers are put in rooms with all kinds of materials, styrofoam and toys and flowers and even coffee beans, and asked to build collage that reflect how they feel regarding a new product. And they may create any montage they feel and encouraged to get as messy as they want. So Time Warner Cable is a company that provides computer communication and cable TV content to residential users wish to see the impact of a new ad campaign and let this company Spark to take potential users on a sensory safari. So this nonverbal information proved to be critically important to Time Warner. They realized that it can be hard to talk about how you feel concerning technology in a traditional focus group. When people are allowed to fully engage in all of their senses, they can say a lot. Yes, and who knew playtime could be so profitable? Now, common techniques used in qualitative research. Qualitative research apply a nearly endless number of techniques, and some techniques overlaps more than one of the orientations that we've discussed, and we're gonna see some of them: focus group interview, depth interview, conversation, semi-structured interview, observations. So the first one, focus group interview, is so widely used that many advertising and research companies do nothing but focus group interviews. In this sense, it's wrongly synonymous with qualitative research. Focus groups are very important qualitative research techniques and deserve considerable discussions. So a focus group interview is an unstructured, free-flowing interview with a small group of people, usually between 6 and 10. They are led by a trained moderator who follows a flexible format encouraging dialogue among respondents. Topics include employee programs, employee satisfaction, brand meaning, problems with products, advertising themes, or new product concepts. The group meets at a central location at a designated time, and then participants may range from consumers talking about hair coloring, engineering can talk about the oil patch, or children can talk about toys, and so on. And the moderator begins by providing some opening statement to broadly steer the discussion in the intended direction. And discussion topics emerge at the group initiative, not the moderator. Consistent with phenomenological approaches, moderators should avoid direct questioning unless absolutely necessary. Advantages: relatively fast, easy to execute, allow respondents to piggyback off each other's idea, multiple perspective, flexibility to allow more detailed description, and a high degree of scrutiny. Group composition, like I said, 6 to 7 people, relatively homogeneous, and similar lifestyles and experiences. The moderator leads a focus group, but makes sure that everyone gets a chance to speak and contribute. He's leading the discussion. Qualities of a good moderator: have rapport with the group, to be a good listener, try not to interject with his or her own opinions, and to control discussion without being overbearing. Discussion guides, sometimes written introductory comments informing the group about the focus group purpose and the rules, and outlines the topics and the questions that will be addressed in the group session. This is a guide, 5 points: welcome and introduction, some icebreakers, questions that are increasingly more specific. Next one, if there are very specific objectives to be accomplished, and debriefing. In the end is about debriefing. Interactive media and online focus group refers to the qualitative research effort in which a group of individuals provide unstructured comments by entering their remarks into an electronic internet display board of some types, maybe a chat room session or in the form of a blog. And because respondents enter their comments into the computer, transcripts of verbatim responses are available immediately after the group session. Online groups can be quick and cost efficient, but it's a less personal interaction between the participants, and the group synergy and snowballing of ideas may be diminished. Several companies have established a form of informal or continuous focus group by establishing an internet blog for that purpose, and it's called focus blog when the intention is to mine the site for business research purposes. Online versus face-to-face focus group techniques. A company can facilitate a formal online focus group by setting up a private chat room for that purpose, and participants in formal and informal online focus groups feel that their anonymity is very secure. But often respondents will say things in this environment that they would never say otherwise. Because participants do not have to be together in the same room at a research facility, the number of participants in an online focus group can be larger than traditional focus groups. 25 participants or more is not uncommon for simultaneous chat room format, and can be widely in different locations since the internet does not have geographical restrictions and boundaries. A major disadvantage: the researchers do not exercise much control in precisely who is participating, and the person could very easily not match the desired profile and even answer screening questions, and is a misleading way simply to participate. There are drawbacks as well. Moderators cannot see body language and facial expressions, excitement, boredom, interest, and so on, and they cannot fully interpret how people react. Disadvantages offer many advantages, but we need to look for disadvantages as well. Focus groups require objective, sensitive and effective moderators. It's very difficult for a moderator to remain completely objective about most topics. Some unique sampling problems arise as well. Researchers often select focus group participants because they have similar background and experiences, or because screening indicates that the participants are more articulate or gregarious than the typical consumer, and they may be not representative for the entire target market. And then the results are not intended to be representative of a larger population. Another one, not so much an issue with online format where respondents can remain anonymous. Traditional face-to-face may not be useful for discussing sensitive topics in social settings, and usually involves people with little to no familiarity with each other. So people normally do not like to discuss in public, may as well prove difficult to discuss in a focus group. And focus groups do cost a considerable amount of money, particularly when they are not conducted by someone employed by the company desiring the focus groups. So our more expensive approaches may cost thousands of dollars to conduct and thousands of dollars to analyze and disseminate. So prices as well are very different. So yes, these were advantages and disadvantages. An alternative to focus group is a depth interview. Is one-on-one interview between a professional researcher and a research respondent. Depth interviews are much the same as psychological clinical interviews, but with a different purpose. The researcher asks many questions and follows up each answer with probes for additional elaboration. Like focus group, the interviewer role is critical, and he or she must be a highly skilled individual who can encourage the respondent to talk freely without influencing the direction of the conversation. Laddering is a term used for a particular approach to probing, asking respondents to compare differences between brands at different levels. What usually results is that the first distinctions are attribute level distinction, the second are benefit level distinction, and the third are at the value or motivational level. And laddering can then distinguish two brands of skateboarding shoes, for example, based on the materials they are made of, A and B, the comfort that they provide, and then C, the excitement that they create. Conversations. Holding conversations in qualitative research is an informal data gathering approach in which the researcher engages a respondent in a discussion of the relevant subject matter, and this approach is almost completely unstructured, and the researcher enters the conversation with few expectations. The goal is to have the respondent produce a dialogue about his or her lived experiences, meaning will be extracted from the resulting dialogues. A conversational approach to qualitative research is particularly appropriate in phenomenological research for developing grounded theory. Semi-structured interviews usually come in written form and ask respondents for short essay responses to specific open-ended questions. Respondents are free to write as much or as little as they want, and the questions would be divided into sections typically, and within each section the opening question would be followed by some probing questions. When these are performed face to face, there is room for less structured follow-ups. Advantages include the ability to address more specific issues, and responses are usually easier to interpret than other qualitative research approaches. The researchers can simply prepare the questions and write ahead of time, and in writing the questions, are administered without the presence of the interviewer, semi-structured interviews can be relatively cost-effective. Social networking is one of the most impactful trends in recent times, and for many consumers, particularly younger generation, social networking sites like Facebook and Instagram have become the primary tool for communicating with friends, both far and near and known and unknown. So social networking has replaced large volume of emails and many would say face-to-face communication as well. While the impact that social networking will eventually have on society is an interesting question, what is the most relevant to marketing research is the large portion of information that discusses marketing and consumer-related information. Companies can assign research assistants to monitor the site for information related to their particular brands, and then the information can be coded as either positive or negative. When too much negative opinion or too much negative information is being spread, the company can try to react to change this type of opinions. Free association sentence completion methods. Free association technique simply records a respondent's first cognitive reaction, top of mind, to some stimulus. And it's a test. The Rorschach is an inkblot test. Typifies the free association method, and respondents view an ambiguous figure and are asked to say the first thing that comes in their mind. So these free association techniques allow the researchers to map a respondent's thought or memory. The sentence completion method is based on free association principles, and respondents simply are required to complete a few partial sentences with the first word or phrase that comes into the mind. Answers to sentence completion questions tend to be more extensive than responses to word association test. And although the responses lack the ability to probe for meaning, as in other qualitative techniques, they are very effective in finding out what is on a respondent's mind. As well, very quick and very cost-effective. And free association and sentence completion tasks are sometimes used in conjunction with other approaches. Other techniques. Observation can be a very important qualitative tool, and the participant observer approach typifies how observation can be used to explore various issues. Meaning is extracted from field notes. Field notes are the researcher's description of what actually happens in the field, and these notes then become the text from which meaning is extracted. Observation may as well take place in visual form. Researchers may observe employees in their workplace, consumer in their home, or try to gain knowledge from photographic records of one type or another. Observation can either be very inexpensive, such as when a research associate sits and simply observes behavior, or it can be very expensive, as in most participant observer studies. Observational research has advantages for gaining insight into things that respondents cannot or will not verbalize. Collages. Business researchers sometimes have respondents prepare a collage to represent their experiences, and these are analyzed for meaning, much in the same manner as text dialogues are analyzed. Computer software can even be applied to help develop potential grounded theories from visual representations. Collages offer the advantages of flexibility, but is also very much subject to the researcher interpretation. Projective research techniques is an indirect means of questioning, enabling respondents to project beliefs and feelings onto a third party, an inanimate object, or a task situation. Projective techniques usually encourage respondents to describe a situation in their own words with little prompting by interviewers. And individuals are expected to interpret the situation within the context of their own experiences. attitudes and personalities, and to express opinion and emotion that may be hidden from others and possibly themselves. So projective techniques are particularly useful in studying sensitive issues. Thematic apperception tests, sometimes called the picture interpretation techniques, present subjects with an ambiguous picture and ask the subject to tell what is happening in the pictures now and what might happen next. So themes or thematics are elicited on the basis of the perpetual interpretive apperception used of the picture. So the researcher then analyzes the content of the stories that the subjects relate. So it's a projective research techniques. Sometimes it's just a series of pictures with some continuity, so that stories may be constructed in a variety of settings. And here we have one. Yeah. Do you think we need to upgrade our word processing software? And then what do you expect? Yeah, it's just a stimulus. Try expect an answer. Exploratory research in science and in practice. Any research tool can be misapplied. Exploratory research cannot take place of conclusive confirmatory research. Many qualitative tools are best applied in exploratory design. They are limited in the ability to draw conclusive inferences or test hypotheses. And one of the biggest drawbacks is interpretation. And sometimes the term interpretive research is used synonymously with qualitative research, when only one researcher interprets the meaning of what a single person said in a depth interview or similar techniques, or should be very cautious before major business decisions are made based on these results. Replication means that the same results and conclusions will be drawn if the study is repeated by different researchers with different respondents following the same methods. So would the same conclusion be reached based on another researcher's interpretation? And some qualitative research methodologies were generally frowned upon the years based on a few early and public misapplications during what was known as the motivational research era. While many of the ideas produced during the time had some merit, or can sometimes be the case, too few researchers did too much interpretation on too few respondents. So compounding this, managers were quickly to act on the results, believing that the results peaked inside one's consciousness and therefore held some type of extra power. And barriers to the scientific decisions. Objectivity and recoverability are two characteristics of scientific inquiry. Are focus groups objective and replicable? Would three different researchers or interpret the focus group data identically? How should the facial expression or nod of the head be interpreted? Well, a scientific decision approach always will be used or needed, but in practice, many business decisions are based solely on the results of focus group interviews of some other exploratory results. And the primary reasons are the one that we see on the slides: time, money, and emotion. Time, sometimes researchers simply are not given enough time to follow up on exploratory research. Money, researchers are not follow up on exploratory research results because sometimes it's too costly. Yeah, do you realize that tens of thousands of dollars may have already been spent on qualitative research? And emotion, time, money, and emotions are all related. Decision makers sometimes become so anxious to have something resolved, and they get so excited about some new discovery resulting from a focus group interview that they may act rashly. So the chances of emotion interfering are are there, and then to make sure multiple decision makers are involved in the decision-making process is one. But in conclusion, we suggest that exploratory qualitative research cannot take place of a confirmatory study. However, confirmatory study cannot take place of an exploratory qualitative study either. So while confirmatory studies are best for testing specific ideas, a qualitative study is far better suited for developing ideas and practical theories. Thank you so much. Thank you.